Our sponsored job post. Terms and conditions apply.
Spring into savings with Viking Pest Control. Save on mosquito and tick control, termites, spotted lanternflies, and bat exclusion during Viking Pest Control Spring Savings Event. Get a fast, free quote at VikingPest.com. That's VikingPest.com.
South Jersey's play-by-play home for the Eagles,
Touchdown!
Sixers,
It's good!
and Flyers.
Oh, big save by Carter Hart.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night, a Thursday edition on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And we are live in living color virtually on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Busy show for you, of course. We got Kevin Durso, Flyers back in action tonight. You know, the NHL trade deadline is just a couple days away. Where are the Flyers at right now? I mean, they just not a good team, all right? They're not a winning team. Personally, they need to start selling to me. We saw the Islanders make a trade before tonight's game. They're acquiring players. I think the Flyers need to get rid of some players. We'll talk to Durso about that coming up in about 20 minutes, 18 minutes from now, to get more into that here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Also, of course, we have some thoughts to talk about what Lane Johnson told Mike Gill a bit earlier on 97.3 ESPN. And as always, you out there, 609-403-0973 is the text word for all of you listening on your radio or on your smartphones on 97.3 ESPN mobile app. For those of you watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can comment as you watch the show on the stream. Just follow at 973 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So, for those of you who didn't get the full live appearance of Lane Johnson earlier, Lane Johnson was on with Mike Gill earlier in the show. For the full interview, go to 973ESPN.com. But Lane brought up a couple things that I thought were very, very, very important to point to, because people have a perception of the Eagles team and their organization that I think sometimes is built upon an alternate reality. So many times in life, we meet people. We've all been in this situation. And maybe it's a little different because with things slowly opening up, you're not meeting as many new people and you're subjected to the trolls on Twitter. But back in the day when we actually used to meet people in public, you run into people and they make comments and they say things that make you scratch your head or look around like, what are you talking about? Like I heard a guy at the gym the other day. He's trying to explain to a young lady about the kind of music that's good today. And he starts describing a certain genre of music as Southern rock, which I immediately had to correct him and explain to him that's Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry. It has something to do with modern music. And that ended up being a strange conversation in and of itself with a gentleman I think who doesn't really understand music. But I digress. You meet people who live in different realities when you go out in public, right? And I think the problem is that there's a perception of the Eagles that I don't think exists in reality. Lane Johnson said this to Mike Gill today on the Sports Bash. Now, this is a guy, this isn't Josh speaking. This is not Mike Gill. This isn't some random troll. No, this is a guy who lived what happened last year. This is a guy who was in the building telling you what happened last year.
Very difficult. We had a lot of young players coming in who ended up playing well, but having guys like Brandon Brooks back in the lineup, Isaac was injured for some time, get myself back in the lineup and getting really guys that play, a lot of football together back on the field and doing what we love. I feel like we'll be good. But obviously, last season isn't a representation of what the Eagles are about or what we want to be.
Two parts there. Number one, the last part. He said that last year was not a representation of who we are or what we want to be. That's somebody in the building. So you can criticize last season all you want. But it seems like from a player standpoint, there is a level of pride for them in that building that says, we want to play at a certain level. We have a certain level of expectation. So I know there is a contingent of you out there who say, hey, this team, they're a 5-6 win team next year. The players don't see it that way. The players don't think about it that way. And because of that, I think you yourself have to adjust your own expectations. This isn't a player getting up and saying, we're in a rebuilding. We're going to do our best. This isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars, okay? This isn't a team like the Lions where Dan Campbell is telling you to bite off kneecaps. Okay, this isn't the Jags where you have a brand new guy who's never coached in the NFL, Urban Meyer, coming to Jacksonville. This is the Philadelphia Eagles. We are just a few years removed from them winning a Super Bowl. Lane Johnson has been through the multiple iterations of this franchise. He was there at the beginning of the Chip Kelly era. He was there for the entire Doug Peterson era. He is now on his third head coach. And if things go well, he will go to the postseason with his third different head coach, with his third different offensive play caller. So if he's telling you, look, last year you can put it in a ball and throw it in the trash can, then guess what? I'm going to put it in a ball and throw it in the trash can because he's telling you that last year was not indicative. Now, the other part of what he said, he emphasized again later with Mike Gill earlier on the Sports Bash about how this team looks on paper, specifically with the offensive line.
On paper, it's looking good. I think Malata had a great year last year who just kept progressing, and Dillard was progressing too before the injury. So that'll be an interesting battle to watch. But on paper, it's looking good. If we can stay healthy, I feel like we'll be dangerous.
If we can stay healthy, Mailata looked good. Dillard looked good before he got injured. I don't think Lane Johnson is the kind of guy who just says stuff for the sake of saying it. If you've ever listened to him do interviews, he's not somebody who just says random things. There's a lot of purpose behind what he says. And, Mike Gill mentioned he's been on this, the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast. I mean, he's dropping multiple curse words during those podcasts, and he's pretty brutally honest about things. That guy's not afraid to give you an opinion usually. And I'm telling you right now, if he's telling you that this team looks good on paper, especially with the offensive line, if they could be healthy, they could be really good. You know what? I'm buying it. Not just because he said so, but because of the fact that he is serious about how good this team can be. Again, this is an all-pro tackle. This isn't listen, if Isaac Seumalo said this, or some other random offensive lineman like Luke Juriga or Jack Driscoll, then okay, I'd be like, all right, he's just blowing smoke. This is Lane Johnson saying this. So I think we all need to adjust our perspective on this team. Again, there's a lot of people who have an attitude out there that this team is a 6-win team or it's a 5-win team. I think we're not watching the same football. Every year, there's a team that only wins a handful of games who are in playoff contention next year. I'm not promising you the Eagles are going to go 10-6 or 11-5, but I'm saying it's a 17-game schedule, and if they end up 9-8 or 8-9, I will not be surprised at all because they are in a division where the Cowboys and the Giants, who are both sitting ahead of them in the NFL draft, have a lot of needs. The Giants' offensive line is poor. The Cowboys' secondary is miserable. The Giants have almost no pass rush. The Cowboys, well, they had to fire the defensive coordinator because Mike McCarthy isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, and he brought his buddy Mike Nolan with him, the Dallas. So you have two teams already in the division who, frankly, I have no idea how good they can be till after the draft, but I know they have a lot of holes. Washington, Ryan Fitzpatrick at least stabilized the quarterback position, and they won the division with the law firm of Haskins, Heineke, Smith. I mean, it was ridiculous last year. Oh, yeah, Kyle Allen. How about Kyle Allen? He played for a hot minute. They got injured. Poor guy. Destroyed his knee. That's football. But anyway, It's not like the division is a bunch of juggernauts, okay? There's some good but not great teams, and they all have flaws. So if you go 1-1 against every team in the division, you're already at 3-3. So 6 of your 17 games, you're at 500. So all you got to do is win half of those games. And the last time I checked, half of 10 is 5. And 5 plus 3 is 8. That's 8-8. So one game is the swing. That's how I look at the Eagles right now. They are a 500 team potentially. And part of the reason why they are a 500 team is because of the man who will be the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. This is what Lane Johnson had to say.
I like how he carries himself. He carries himself like a veteran. He doesn't say a whole lot, but I was impressed with how he handled his situation in college from Alabama to Norman to OU. You know, through that adversity, just kept battling, and I think that speaks volumes. And then, you know, a 4 or 5 game stretch, you can take, you know, the good from a bad, whatever. But I know he's ready for a full season. But a guy who's a confident leader and who is infectious with that as far as his teammates are concerned.
So now we've had Lane Johnson, Jalen Reagor. We've had multiple players. Even Jalen Mills is no longer here anymore. And we've had other players step up and say, Jalen Hurts is a leader. His leadership is infectious. He's a guy that you want to follow. He's a guy that, you know, understands you. He's a guy that, you know, you believe in when he walks into the huddle. I'm sorry. One guy says it. All right, cool. 2 guys say it. All right, interesting. 3, 4, 5 people start saying it. You better start buying that stock. Leadership is one of the most important things about sports when it comes to quarterback position. People get so enamored with the physical traits, all right? Everybody wants this guy with a powerful throwing arm. Well, you know who had a great throwing arm? Jeff George and Jamarcus Russell. How did they turn out in the NFL? Nobody liked them, and they both fizzled out of the league. Everybody wants the guy who's the phenomenal freak athlete, right? Well, that was RG3, and he got injured so many times, he's now barely hanging on as a backup in the league. Your physical traits do not always equal success on the football field. Aside from Tom Brady, who's the obvious thing everybody points to, it's not like Peyton Manning was the epitome of the superstar athlete. Ben Roethlisberger, I personally have made fun of for being about one offseason away from being the Pillsbury Doughboy. All right? But guess what? Those guys have Super Bowl rings. Those guys go into the Hall of Fame. And it's not just because they can throw a football. It's because people follow them. Do not undersell Jalen Hurts' leadership qualities. He may not be, as I've told you before, the sexiest toy or the most exciting car on the lot, but he is definitely a guy who can get the job done. And if multiple guys believe in him and will follow him, I am not going to tell you, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to come on here with an agenda and tell you that Jalen Hurts can't be successful. Jalen Hurts has what it takes to be an NFL quarterback, to be successful. And you know what? It's not just one guy saying it. It's multiple people saying it. And you know what? You could have dismissed it as saying, well, you know, Jalen Reagor and Hurts, they played together and they like each other and blah, blah, blah. Lane Johnson don't need to do anything. Now, maybe Lane Johnson is supporting his fellow Sooner, I should say, from his alma mater. But Lane Johnson has a history of telling it as it is. I think the only topic that Lane Johnson has ever danced around is Carson Wentz, because apparently everyone wants to dance around Carson Wentz because no one wants to be mean to the guy. No one wants to hurt his feelings. I'm telling you, man. Jalen Hurts is the real deal. He's a leader. In this team, he's a leader at quarterback, not a sensitive Susie. Sensitive Susie's now in Indianapolis. They can pamper him over there. The man for the job is in Philadelphia. Lane Johnson gave you a lot of good stuff. For the full interview, go to 973ESPN.com that Mike Gill had with Lane Johnson. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 973 ESPN. We'll get to your thoughts and comments a little bit later in the hour. As we always do, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, where you can jump in on the comments on 973 ESPN. Also, text the show if you're listening on your radio or on the 973 ESPN mobile app at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Game Night being brought to my friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm excited that baseball is back. I told Mike Yell earlier, I'm falling asleep at night watching MLB Network. That's my last thing I see when I fall asleep. It's the first thing I see when I wake up in the morning. There's nothing like watching a game with great weather, a cold drink, and a little action with FanDuel Sportsbook. And FanDuel is letting new users just like you swing for the fences risk-free. Get up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. And if you already have an account with FanDuel Sportsbook, check out the $25 back each day you bet a same-game parlay and it falls one leg short. So if you're a new user, you get up to $1,000 back on your first bet risk-free. If you're a current user, you can get same-game parlay bets. They fall one leg short, up to $25 back every day you play all season long. These are just some of the great reasons why you should be jumping on FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. So if you're a new user, download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, sign up with my promo code Hennig to get on the baseball action and your first bet risk-free. That's promo code Hennig on FanDuel Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older to play in prison. NJRPA. First online real money wager only for risk-free bet. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. You know who's got problems? The Flyers have problems. We're going to talk about Kevin Durso next because I got to get the straight answer from Durso. You know who's going to be honest with me? Kevin Durso is going to be honest with me because this Flyers team looks like they are just dead on arrival right now ahead of the NHL trade deadline. I'm Josh Hennig. This is Game Night. You listen to 97.3 ESPN FM. Don't forget the free 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can customize your alerts right now. Just download the app. Go to the alert settings. You want Eagles updates. You want Sixers, Phillies, Flyers, South Jersey high school sports. Whatever you want, you can customize your alerts with the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City.
It's Sixers basketball tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Jake bounces the Bible. He goes in and jams it. A hanging two-hand stuff of a cheese Bible. Oh, yeah.
The Sixers travel to New Orleans to face the Pelicans tomorrow. Coverage begins at 8 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN.
When you want experience, go for the best. Pick up the phone and call Dennisville Fence.
Right now, Dennisville Fence is installing your neighbor's new fence. Right now, another neighbor is signing up for their new fence job. Right now is the best time to get started on your new fence or railing project because right now, the pandemic is causing major supply chain delays. What used to take days can now take weeks or months. So the earlier you start on your new fence or railing project, the more likely you'll finish your project on time, and the sooner you'll enjoy more privacy, safety, security, and style. Don't delay your new fence or railing project. Get started today. Dennisville Fence is open, and we are now scheduling new estimates for spring installations and also offering material sales for DIY and new construction projects.
Go with experience, go for the best. Pick up the phone and call Dennisville Fence. 1-800-499-FENCE. Visit DennisvilleFence.com.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. As always, with your text a little bit later in the hour, 609-403-0973. And we say hello to all of you out there on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as you watch the show here on 97.3 ESPN. Before we get back to the Eagles talk, we will get to the hockey talk because we are days away from the NHL trade deadline. The Islanders, who the Flyers are playing tonight, made a move, yet the Flyers are still living in limbo. So we'll talk more about that joining us right now on the Boardwalk on the hotline. It is our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, joins us as Kevin, the Flyers are back in action tonight. So the Islanders made a move. The Flyers still haven't done, well, pretty much of anything except for call guys from the taxi squad. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I'd be doing better if the Flyers would stop living in limbo. I feel like I'm in an alternate reality sometimes when I watch other teams trying to figure out where they stand in the world. Like the Devils pretty much just told you they're done. They're out, right? So, and they're not exactly those aren't nobodies that were traded away today to the Islanders. So what is going on with the Flyers ahead of the trade line? What is the situation with this team?
Well, I think everybody was waiting for something like this to happen. I think that somebody had to be the first team to make a move like this. And the Islanders are the ones who may get the dominoes to start falling here because this is significant. The Islanders basically just flat out said, we're going for it. The Devils basically told you where their season's going as well, and they trade two guys away who were not small names by any stretch. Kyle Palmieri was known to be going. I believe I brought his name up to Mike yesterday on the Sports Bash that he had sat out a game earlier this week. We knew that it was coming at some point. Kind of was the question of whether or not it was going to happen during the course of this week or if it was going to wait until the weekend, because the Devils could certainly have held out until the weekend and seen if there were a bunch of teams trying to fight for his services for the rest of the year. And to be honest, I was a little caught off guard by Travis Zajac being thrown in that. His name didn't come up at all. It seemed like he had a no trade clause as well. So he waived that to go to the New York Islanders, and that's pretty significant stuff. So now I think we'll see if anything else comes of it. I had mentioned that Taylor Hall had sat out a game as well for that kind of precautionary measure. Columbus is holding David Savard out of a game tonight, so that's another name that's out there. I believe those two, Savard and Hall, are the top of the list on TSN's trade bait list. So you're seeing that teams are kind of starting to admit that they know they've got to try to get something for these players. In the Flyers case, I don't know if they're holding out for that. I just wonder if maybe they just quite honestly don't have the pieces like these other teams. The Devils had a piece like Kyle Palmieri that you could look at and go, that's a significant upgrade for a team that's trying to make a playoff run. Now, I think Scott Lawton could be that type of guy, but I think the question mark is, do the Flyers want to part ways with Scott Lawton? And I think that's the big question. So that's what they're toying with at the moment. I think you've got to explore it because you've got to play your cards right at the deadline here. You've got to try to see if you can't get assets in for something. As I told Mike yesterday, I think the biggest thing the Flyers need to do from now until whenever the start of next season is, we don't know the exact date, obviously, but whenever the next season starts, is get somebody who can play alongside of Ivan Provorov. Get that defenseman who can play on the top pairing. And you might not get that guy until draft day, let's say. It might be a draft day trade that requires a lot of pieces to be moving in that place. But if you were to trade Scott Lawton and get a valuable draft pick that becomes a piece that you could move down the line, let's say, that might be what helps you land the top pairing defenseman you need. So that's why I think you've got to explore it. I'm not opposed to holding on to Scott Lawton, obviously. I think you would want to keep him around if you can. But I think there's teams out there that are very hungry to try to win a Stanley Cup in this season in these unusual times where the structure of the playoffs isn't what it normally is. You got to explore it because I think a team would be willing to pay a good price for him.
So two things, my thoughts on that. Number one, I'm with you. I don't want to see Scott Lawton go, but I'm not beholden to him. Like, he's not going to be the make or break. Like, I feel like there's a handful of guys on the team that have, like, are hands off, right? It's like, Carter Hart, Provorov, guys like that. Like, those are like the cornerstones of your future. I just don't put Scott Lawton in that category. The other thing I would say, Kevin, is with Vancouver, they're probably not going to play for another week or two at this point with everything that's going on over there. That's one team that is not making or doing any deals right now. They're not selling. They're not buying. So if you're the Flyers, you got to leverage that. You got to turn around and be like, hey, man, you can't trade with them. You're stuck with us.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, here's the thing, too, about what you said at the beginning anyway, with these guys who they have. It's hard to trade guys who have contracts that just don't seem movable. I mean, you got two guys sitting here who have no movement clauses in their deals. That's Claude Giroux and Kevin Hayes. Jake Voracek's contract is virtually not able to be moved at all because of the cap hit. I think you can throw in other players into that mix as well. James Van Riemsdyk's another guy who I would throw in there. And of course, James Van Riemsdyk had this really good start to the season, and it was a possibility you may have been able to entice a team to take a player like that down the stretch. He's gone completely ice cold now, so I don't think he's going to be able to be moved either. And then I do think you still build around a Sean Couturier at forward. Joel Farabee's becoming a piece that you build around. I'd say the same thing for guys even like Oscar Lindblom. And then defensively, like we said, it's Provorov, and then you've got to kind of figure out where it goes from there. But I really think Provorov needs somebody to play with. He needs somebody in that vein of a Matt Niskanen type, maybe not the exact same player, but he needs somebody like that. And that's really what you got to focus on trying to get, and you've got to look around for it. And I think that the hard part is the Flyers just don't have a lot of attractive pieces on the roster that allow them to make that addition immediately. It's why the offseason seems like the prime time to make a deal, because of the fact that you're going to be able to adjust your cap situation much, much easier in that situation, because you're able to look to the next season and try to figure out how you get to that number instead of trying to do in-season navigation. And a lot of teams have that problem. So I think that that's really the time to make that significant move. But even just a small move like moving Lawton, and I mentioned yesterday on the Sports Bash, I think that Toronto's a team that would be a suitor for him. That would be a type of team that I would look into to see if they feel like they're in a spot. If the Islanders just went for it now, and the Islanders are sitting at 54 points coming into tonight's game, and certainly in a good spot in the standings, they're tied for 5th in the NHL in points. Toronto's right at the top of the list, and if Toronto thinks they can go for it, they're going to look to add pieces like that. And I'd be willing to lay a wager that Wayne Simmons being there, knowing Scott Lawton's abilities, would be able to vouch for him and say he's a piece that could help. So I think that there's some connections there that could make that a good fit. But I think the Flyers ultimately have to explore that small move first and foremost to get the ball rolling on some of the changes that are to come, and then they can really adjust in the offseason.
Kevin Durso joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. The NHL trade deadline is this Monday afternoon is the cutoff for these deals to have. That's April 12th for those of you who are counting the days. So we are under 4 days until you can make any more transactions when it comes to team to team in the NHL. At Kevin Durso on Twitter for all your Flyers and NHL coverage. Flyers back in action tonight versus the Islanders at 7 p.m. here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, moving forward, we obviously, you and I have talked about this before. This team is not a playoff team at this point. So, what is the benefit for the rest of this year? What are some of the things that you tell Flyer fans out there? Here's what you should watch for moving forward, because I understand mathematically not eliminated, but when you and the Rangers are tied with points, I think anybody who's got two eyes feels the Rangers are just a better team right now than the Flyers. So to me, Flyers are out of it. So what do you look for from the Flyers? What are things to watch for from the black and orange moving forward the rest of the year?
Well, before I answer that, I kind of laughed when you said the thing about the Rangers because of the fact that I actually mentioned that, I believe on Open Ice Hits, that I think that if there's a team that in the East that can actually challenge Boston for that final playoff spot, don't overlook the Rangers being 5 points back. And I believe that the Rangers closed their season with 2 games against Boston. So if they're within 4 points going to the final weekend of the season, they've got a shot. And that's really saying something. So I wouldn't overlook them. They've been playing with a lot more confidence lately. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Now back to the Flyers situation here and things to watch down the stretch of the season. First and foremost, Carter Hart. I think you want to see him get his confidence back, continue to play with some positive outcomes here. And I mentioned it yesterday. It doesn't have to be game results per se, but you need to see him have successful games. If he's losing games 3-2 in a shootout like he did against the Islanders on Saturday, he's losing games 2-1. Even the game against Boston, while he had 1 goal allowed that he would like back, I'm sure, it's realistically a 3-2 game that ends up being a 4-2 loss because of the empty netter. So he's giving you enough of a performance that you're in the game. That's what I think you need to see from him. You don't want to see these games where they get blown out and things like that. And then outside of that, I think that there's potential for young players and prospects to start making their way to the NHL just to get a tryout kind of. It's almost like an extended preseason for this team. One name that's obvious to pay attention to, he actually just signed last week. Cam York is now part of the organization. He's turned professional. He'll be making his debut probably this weekend against with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, I should say. And he is most likely going to get a look at the NHL level, I think. I mean, especially now that the team probably already knows what their future holds in terms of the playoff race. I wouldn't be shocked to see him up. We've seen Tanner Lazinski up already. I think if Wade Allison keeps going at the AHL level, he could be a guy who could come up. And I mean, ultimately, I would even encourage people, if you can, and it's not always the easiest thing to do, if you can, find access to watch the AHL team as well, because currently the Phantoms have 2 19-year-olds who were drafted this year who are only playing at the AHL level because the OHL is not playing in Canada right now. They're still shut down and trying to figure out a way to have a shortened season. So these 2 guys are 19 years old and having really good success. Tyson Forrester was the first-round pick. Zaid Wisdom was a 4th-rounder, and they're both having outstanding seasons at the AHL level, and they're teenagers. And it's exciting to watch. It makes them a fun team to watch collectively, and I think some of those pieces might be making their way to the NHL too, just to get a look to see what this team has moving forward, and especially if they want to try to build around it, because Wade Allison is a guy who I think people should watch for. He's got a ridiculous shot. He's the type of guy who Flyers fans have been waiting for, a guy who has a shot like that, who can score at will. It seems Joel Farabee's kind of shown flashes of that as well. Those are all pieces that I think you pay attention for as you move down the stretch of a season that's pretty much lost from a playoff standpoint, but there's games to still be played, and there's certainly things you can learn about yourself and learn about the team's direction going forward from that.
Now, you mentioned, let's take a little different with Cam York. So he's a guy that people have heard of, but he's also a guy they don't know a lot about. So what is something that you can tell people about? Who is Cam York? What can he be? Because I feel like he's a name for people, but they can't really identify his game yet.
Sure, and I mean, he's been exposed in different ways. There's ways to see what he can do. He was the captain of the U.S. World Junior team that won the gold medal this past December and into January. That was broadcast all over NHL Network, I believe, so there was a way to watch him then, and you kind of saw him play a different role than he played when he was with Michigan, because he was kind of one of the star players at Michigan. With the U.S. team, there were so many star players. It was kind of like being on an all-star team. He kind of took a step back from the way he usually played and didn't feel the pressure of being such an offensive producer. I'd have to see a couple of his games at the AHL level to kind of see how he approaches this, how Scott Gordon decides to use him. But ultimately, he's a good two-way player. He's got leadership qualities. really good power play guy. He probably could come right up and essentially quarterback the power play from the blue line right away. That's something that he doesn't need work on. I would just need to see mostly, I guess, his physicality at this level to see how he stacks up against guys who are obviously going to be bigger and stronger. He is a college prospect, so it's not like he was playing with underage players who are going into their draft years and things like that. He was playing with guys who were going to make the jump to the pro level at some point very soon. But still, I want to see how he would keep up with the pace, keep up with the physicality, and see how he measures up. But he's got a lot of the good intangibles that you need, and he's got some really good hockey ability as well, where he just skates well, maneuvers the puck well, plays his defensive positioning pretty well, and does a lot of those things. So I'd like to just see how it translates to the NHL level.
Another question I have is, do we need to see more Alex Lyon down the stretch? Because I know Brian Elliott's going to be a free agent. He's getting older. I mean, there's no guarantee he's coming back next year. So is this maybe an opportunity to maybe get Lyon, maybe a little playing time to see, what his future is in the organization?
I think there's an opportunity to get him more playing time, but I don't think it's for the reason that you mentioned. I actually would say it's more for if Carter Hart needs that kind of reset time, the extended practice time. There's no harm in just playing Alex Lyon for a game when the result is not what matters. You're trying to build off of positive results within a game, I think, at this point, and not necessarily worried about. I mean, they're going to sit there and tell you they're worried about points and they're within 5 and they've got a shot and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, tonight they're probably out there trying to win a hockey game and try to figure out a way to get back in this race. But as it goes forward, I think once you get beyond the trade deadline, especially if they do make, like I believe they will, if you make at least one move, you will have the ability to see where the season's really going. I think that will send a message of kind of playing for next season at this point, playing for your spot next season, playing to not be moved, playing to be a guy who has a role on a team going forward. Because I do think that part of it that comes into play, and we've talked about it a lot over the years, is the leadership group. And that doesn't mean that the leadership group is completely getting moved, but I think that that's what you have to bring into question is it's the same guys every year that we keep talking about over and over and over again. And basically, as Mike said earlier in the show today, Carter Hart's the X factor of that, where when he's performing really well, it kind of makes you forget about what the ceiling is for everybody else. He elevates everybody to a different level because the key thing that you're not doing is giving up goals, and that's where the real problem lies this season. I mean, the Flyers aren't going to miss the playoffs because they lost to Boston this week and lost a game to the Islanders in a shootout last week. That's not why they're missing the playoffs. They're missing the playoffs because they lost 2 games to Buffalo 6-1 earlier in the year. They lost to the Rangers 9-0. They lost to the Rangers 8-3. They were losing games like that when those teams are behind you in the standings at the time you're playing them. You got to find a way to win, and you got to be prepared, and you've got to not make those mistakes over and over again. And those are the games that come back and haunt you even more than the one when you're sitting there in the week before the trade deadline going, it's a must-win regulation. You can't lean on that. So that's not the reason that they missed the playoffs, is because they just didn't win the game on Tuesday. It's much further than that, and it's much deeper than that. So I think that once you get past the point where you sit there and you say, and come to the realization, like I have, like a lot of other people have, that the season is not going further than May 10th, then you start to think about who you can play and how you can relieve some of that pressure and maybe give Carter Hart the time he needs to get the practice in if he needs it, and that's where Alex Lyon comes in. I wouldn't, as I told Mike yesterday, I wouldn't go out and trade for a goalie. I know that was a rumor. I don't see the point in it. I wouldn't waste an asset trying to do it when you have no future this season. Just focus on the guys you have in the system and try to get through the season as best you can.
All right, so you kind of didn't answer one of the things I asked earlier, because I sent you into a tailspin, which was my fault. But so do you expect Brian Elliott to be back here next year?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I expect somebody of his experience to be here. I don't know who it's going to be.
Specifically him, but a veteran goaltender type.
I don't. If you're asking me if I see Alex Lyon building himself up to be a backup goalie to Carter Hart next year, I don't see that. I do think they need a guy who's got some experience, who they know they can lean on. What they really need to try to build similar, and it's a great night to reference this, they need something like the Islanders have. The Islanders have Semyon Varlamov, who's the veteran, and Ilya Sorokin's the new guy who's coming in, and those two seem to play off of each other really well. You know exactly the amount of workload you can give each guy, and Barry Trotz does it with expert way to balance out their workloads so both guys remain fresh into the season. I mean, this is going to be, I believe Sorokin is the one who's starting tonight, and if so, it's his 4th start against the Flyers this season and in his career, obviously, because he's a rookie, and I think he's got 13 career starts. So he just keeps going out there, and he's won 3 in a row against the Flyers too. So it's like, it's not a surprise that you can find kind of the right matchups for guys. You can kind of play with that a little bit. It's funny, we kind of go into these press conferences with Alain Vigneault at the beginning of these games and go, who's going to be the goalie tonight? And you can think you know, and you might be wrong. Like, his rotations are a little funny like this. And I mean, even to say Carter Hart starting tonight, and I kind of would have thought Carter Hart would have started Saturday against Boston, just to go back out there, get the experience, get that team. And Brian Elliott's got a great career record against Buffalo. It's the other way around. Brian Elliott's starting on Saturday. So it kind of was a wild card thrown in there. But I do think that that's the balance that a team needs to have in the league in these days, is a guy with that experience level who can play, in an 82-game season, who can play 35 to 40, and another guy who can play upwards of 50 when you need him down the stretch. But realistically, if you can keep him in the 45 to 50 range, you're doing the right things there and giving them the right balance.
He's Kevin Durso. Follow him on Twitter, Kevin_Durso. All of his Flyers work over at 97.3 ESPN.com. The full Flyers preview the game tonight, 7 o'clock. Flyers and the Islanders here on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. The NHL trade deadline is just days away. As all guests to Kevin up here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. And you heard him mention earlier the Open Ice Hits podcast for more full NHL coverage on that podcast as well. Kevin, great stuff today. I appreciate you putting up with my strange questions.
No problem, Josh. Always a pleasure.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Great stuff from Kevin, as always, here on the show. Get back to your thoughts and comments. 609-403-0973 is the text board. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can comment as well. We'll get to your thoughts as well. 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Lead at the Flyers hockey at 7.
It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey tonight on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates calling all the play-by-play action.
Oh, big save by Carter Hart.
The Flyers are at the Nassau Coliseum to face the Islanders. Tonight, coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey on the radio home of the Flyers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN.
Sponsored by Open Jar Concepts. Attention.
You have the choice, whether it's going out for dinner or ordering takeout at a local restaurant or buying that new outfit from a local boutique. Those choices help to put money back into your community. And Town Square Media South Jersey puts a spotlight on local businesses.
First Bank of Sea Isle City, Cape May County's community bank.
Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelylback.com.
Egg Harbor independent branch leader at Charles Schwab in the Consumer Square Shopping Plaza.
Filling Marble and Tile Outlet, Philadelphia Avenue and Route 30 in Egg Harbor City. FillingMarble.com.
Intuitive Women's Health in Summers Point, accepting new patients. Schedule an appointment today at intuitivewomenshealth.net.
East Coast Roofing, Siding, and Windows services all of South Jersey. If you call, they'll show up. Call East Coast today at 609-646-1444. Online at eastcoastroofing.com.
Thank you for supporting your local businesses. From Town Square Media, South Jersey.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig live in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN. We are live on your radio, 97.3 ESPN, and also the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. If you haven't downloaded the app yet, or if you already have the app, jump on the app, Google Play, Apple Store. You can customize all your alerts on the app. You only want Eagles news, or if you want Flyers and Sixers news. You want Phillies, high school sports, you can customize it all on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Make sure you hit that download button so you can catch the 97.3, all the news from 97.3 ESPN.com. Kevin Durso's coverage of the Flyers, Paul Hudrick, Kevin McCormick, and Jason Blevins' coverage of the Sixers, Frank Close about the Phillies, that and more, all the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can also listen 97.3 ESPN wherever you go in the world. We're also live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can watch the show right here on 97.3 ESPN. We are live at the Matt Black Kia Studios. Matt Black Kia. They want to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Jeff Bonampuki says, "Que paso, muchachos? Que paso, señor?" For those who don't know, que pasa means what's up. So, for those the uninitiated into Espanol. The comment over on the YouTube channel as you watch over there on 97.3 ESPN. Texture mentioned, we talk about quarterbacks and the measurables. Jersey P chimes in, Russell Wilson was too small. Listen, that's the problem with sports sometimes. We get so enamored with these prototypes. This is part of the reason why I go back and forth with Billy Schweim as intently as I do at times. And it's not because Billy, I think is, completely off base. I understand where he's coming from, where he says big guys beat up on little guys. But the idea is that we have these prototypes that we think everyone is supposed to look, act, and be a certain way. But when we limit ourselves to only those players, we may never give other players a chance. The entire league passed on Russell Wilson 3 times. He was a 3rd-round pick. And yet he's going to the Hall of Fame one day. He is the second coming of Fran Tarkenton. The dude's incredible. Aaron Rodgers dropped all the way into the 20s. There are guys that don't get drafted for a variety of reasons as highly as they should. Because either the offense they came from, they didn't interview well, their size, their height, their hand size, how strong supposedly their arm is or isn't. I remember people were, if you go back and watch the scout reports of Joe Montana, people said he had a weak arm. But yet, Bill Walsh went and scouted him and said, his arm's good. I'm good with that. His assistant told him, you got to look at this guy. Don't focus on what people say about him. Watch him for yourself. So many times we look at the quarterback position, we have this false idea of what a quarterback is supposed to be because of what we visualize him supposedly looking based on what other people look like, what other people have done. I don't care what people do. I go on a case-by-case basis. And Jalen Hurts is actually a couple inches taller than Russell Wilson. He's about as thick as Russell Wilson. He might be stronger physically than Russell Wilson is. For those who don't know, Jalen Hurts is has power lifter strength. He is ridiculous for a quarterback in terms of physical build. And it's not restrictive build. It's not like it's muscle bound. It's legitimate power behind him. So if Russell Wilson could be successful in the NFL, so can Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts, you could argue, is more popular in his locker room than Russell Wilson is in his. Not just against Russell Wilson, but I know that there is a perception out there about him that he is not the most beloved guy in his own locker room. Not that he's hated, not that nobody just likes him. It's just that his personality is not very, it's not very magnetic. It's not very endearing. He's not this guy that people are always drawn to across the entire locker room. His own teammates on the offensive side know him much better than the defense. Whereas Jalen Hurts and Nick Foles before him, they can connect with everybody. The linemen, the defensive players, the receivers, everybody. That connectivity, that leadership is a big deal to me. Let's get a comment over on the text board at 609-403-0973. Textures, I'm stoked for the NFL draft. I just wish the Phillies were on tonight. Hopefully, Zach Wheeler and Zach Eflin provide a 1-2 punch, and we bury the Braves, taking the first two on the road. A couple things. First of all, we appreciate you, Texter, listening to the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and your Game Night with Josh Hennig. We appreciate you listening, and I'm super stoked for the draft. The draft is like the draft is like a demarcation for me, because the draft is like the culmination of everything you consumed football-wise in a typical year from August to February. And this year it was actually like September to January, but still, the idea is the same. So now when the draft is done, it's almost like there's a void of football in your life. This is like the last great mountain to climb. And I'm excited. I want to know who the Eagles pick. I want to know who's the third quarterback. If Trevor Lawrence goes 1 and Zach Wilson goes 2, who's the third guy? I think it should be Justin Fields. People keep telling me it might be Mac Jones or Trey Lance. I want to know. Now, I agree with you. I wish the Phillies were on tonight, too. I mean, it's a letdown. They won the game last night. I felt this the same way last week. Like, you had this win, you have this momentum, and then you have an off day. I get the guys need to have an off day, but, like, I don't know. Maybe if I wasn't so... we were without sports for so long that I feel like anytime there isn't sports or a certain team on a certain night, I feel let down. I feel disappointed. So I completely understand where you're coming from, Dexter. Completely understand. All right, Josh Hennig here, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up on the other side, we got the Sports Bash Cash keyword, the final one of today. Take that word, 973ESPN.com, for your chance to win up to $10,000. The next word is tomorrow morning at 9:55. Also, our final Masters update of the day. We got Masters updates all day, every day, today through Sunday. Of course, the Masters, Justin Rose at -7 top of the leaderboard. How about that Patrick Reed -2? I'm liking that guy over there. Flyers hockey at the top of the hour tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Tim Saunders, Steve Coates on the call here tonight. Flyers hockey on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. All of your Philly sports coverage right there on the app.
It's your chance to win Sports Bash Cash up to $10,000. Enter the code words every day at 973ESPN.com or with the free mobile app. The more codes you enter, the more chances you have to win up to $10,000. Here's the Sports Bash Cash code word.
Celery. 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 Enter it now on our website, 973ESPN.com, or use the free mobile app. Sports Bash Cash is brought to you by Jersey Shore Federal Credit Union for all your lending needs. Get the next Sports Bash Cash code word tomorrow morning at 9:55.
It's Sports Bash Cash 10 times a day, every weekday at 55 after each hour, from 9:55 a.m. to 6:55 p.m. Listen all day for your chance to win Sports